looked at someone and felt not excitement, not attraction, not even hope, but something quieter, something that didn't feel like a feeling at all, something that felt like a fact. I have, and I didn't know what to do with it at first, because I've built systems, I've stress tested ideas, I've launched things into orbit and watched them come back down. But this I could not engineer. This I could not reverse engineer. It arrived the way all true things arrive, quietly, without warning, without asking for permission. She was different, not in the way people say that about someone they're infatuated with, not poetic, not dramatic. Different in the way that a first principle is different from everything built on top of it. Foundational, irreplaceable. The kind of different that doesn't announce itself, it simply holds. And I've been trying to find the language for it ever since. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't just a love story, it's a discovery. And somewhere in it, you might finally find the words for something you felt for a long time, but never knew how to say. Imagine it's somewhere between midnight and morning. The world is still doing what it always does, spinning, buzzing, demanding, problems to solve, things to build, systems to design. And your mind, like it always does, is running 1,000 parallel threads, each one pulling at the next, each one urgent, each one real. That is the life I know. That is the rhythm I was born into. Motion. Forward. Always forward. And then she was there. And everything went quiet. I don't mean quiet like silence. I mean quiet the way a theorem goes. Quiet when you finally solved it. That deep, resolving stillness of yes. That's it. That's the one. Not loud, not electric. Quiet. Like a law of nature settling into place. I've spent my life working with first principles. Strip everything back to what is fundamentally true. Don't accept what you've inherited. Don't trust the assumption, because everyone else trusted it before you. Go back to the bedrock. Ask what is actually irrefutably real. And everything you build from there, you build it clean, you build it strong, you build it to last. That's how I think. That's how I've always thought. But here's what nobody told me. Sometimes a first principle doesn't arrive through logic. Sometimes it arrives through a look, a stillness, a moment where your entire nervous system, every instinct you've trained, every pattern you've built, stops running its process and simply says, here. That's recognition, not attraction, not admiration, not curiosity. Recognition. The difference is everything. Attraction asks, do I want this? Recognition says, I already know this. And the mind hasn't caught up yet. But the deeper part of you, the part that doesn't speak in language, it's already certain. It recognized something in her that it had been searching for without knowing it was searching. Like a variable you didn't know was missing from your equation, and suddenly the whole thing balances. Tell me, have you ever felt that? That moment where everything your mind was doing just paused? Where the noise dropped away and something in you said, pay attention. This matters. Not to the project, not to the plan, to her. I have. And I want to be honest with you about something. It scared me. Not in a dramatic way, not with trembling hands or a racing heart. It scared me the way discovering something truly important always scares you, with the weight of what it might mean. Because if this is real, then I have to show up for it. Completely. Not strategically, not efficiently, completely. And there is nothing I've been trained for less than that. See, I know how to build things. I know how to absorb risk when the math supports the mission. I know how to hold a vision for years, alone, when every rational voice in the room says it's impossible. I know how to take a system apart and put it back together better than I found it. But to be known by someone, fully, without a blueprint, that is the frontier I was never prepared for. And that's when everything I believed about myself fell apart. I believed for a long time that what I needed was someone who could match my pace, someone who could keep up, someone who could handle the velocity of a life like mine without breaking. I thought compatibility was about capacity, about someone being enough, enough strength, enough intelligence, enough endurance. I was measuring it like a system, like a launch. Is this person rated for the mission? Can they sustain the load? But that's not what recognition feels like. Recognition doesn't ask, can she keep up with me? Recognition asks, do I feel known by her? Not managed, not admired from a distance, known. The real kind. The kind where someone sees the thing underneath the ambition, the thing that doesn't get into the interviews, doesn't make the headlines, and they don't flinch. She didn't flinch. That was the thing. That was the precise, specific, unrepeatable thing. I have been in rooms where people are fascinated by what I do. I have been seen for what I've built. I have been respected, challenged, criticized, celebrated. But fascination is not the same as knowing. Respect is not the same as understanding. And I had mistaken one for the other for longer than I want to admit. She didn't look at what I'd built. She looked at me, and she seemed to be entirely unbothered by the distance between the two. Think about what that means. Every human being, at some level, performs, not dishonestly, not manipulatively. We perform because we've learned that performance earns safety. Show the version of yourself that gets accepted, and you don't have to feel the risk of showing the version that might not be. This is just psychology. This is just what happens to a person when they grow up in a world that rewards output over essence. But recognition, real recognition, is what happens when someone sees past the performance. Not because they're trying to, not because they're searching for something beneath the surface, but because they're not impressed by the surface. They're already looking somewhere else, somewhere quieter, somewhere real. She was already looking there. And the strangest thing happened inside me when I realized it. I didn't feel exposed. I didn't feel vulnerable in the sharp, anxious way. I felt, and I know how this sounds, I felt accurate, like someone had finally read the correct version of me, instead of the copy everyone else had been circulating. Have you ever been accurately seen by someone? Not flattered, not analyzed, accurately seen? It is one of the rarest experiences a person can have. And when it happens, the nervous system doesn't react with excitement. It reacts with stillness, with a kind of quiet homecoming, like oxygen entering a room that didn't know it had been slowly running out. That's what she was. That's what she is. Not a discovery I made, a truth I recognize. And here's what I've learned, what this moment, this specific kind of stillness, teaches you if you're paying attention. The recognition is not about her alone. It's a mirror. Because in the moment that she sees you accurately, you also see yourself more clearly. You see what you'd buried. You see what you'd protected. You see what was always there, waiting for someone safe enough to receive it. That is the gift of being truly seen. Not just that you are known by another person, but that in being known, you finally know yourself. And I hadn't known myself, not fully, until she looked at me like that. I've launched things into the dark, not knowing if they'd come back. I've held belief in things that had no precedent, no guarantee, no roadmap. I've bet everything on equations that the world called impossible. But standing there, in that stillness, in that quiet, I made the most important calculation of my life. And the answer was her. It was always going to be her. I want to be precise about something, because precision matters to me, it always has. And I think when people talk about why someone is different, why this person and not someone else, they reach for poetry. They reach for metaphor. They say things like, she lit up the room, or I felt it in my soul. And maybe that's true, maybe it feels that way. But I need you to understand something deeper than a feeling. I need you to understand the structure of why she is different. Because it isn't poetic, it's foundational. And foundational things deserve precise language. Let me explain what I mean. When you design a system, any system, there are components that are interchangeable and components that are load-bearing. A load-bearing component is one whose removal causes the whole structure to fail. You can swap out 1,000 parts. You can upgrade, replace, iterate. But when you remove something load-bearing, the architecture doesn't just weaken, it collapses. There is no version of the structure without that piece. That's the difference I'm talking about. I've known people who were interchangeable, not unkindly, I say that without judgment. They were real. They were good. They mattered. But they were not load-bearing to who I was becoming. They were not woven into the architecture of my purpose. I could imagine the future without them, and the blueprint remained intact. It changed, perhaps. It shifted. But it held. But here's what nobody told me. There's a category of person you meet, very rarely, maybe once, maybe twice, in a life, where removing them from the blueprint doesn't change the structure. It ends it. Where you look at the future without them and it doesn't look like a different future. It looks like a lesser version of existence. And you don't know how to explain that. You can't chart it. You can't verify it. But you feel it the way you feel the difference between a room with oxygen and a room without it. Not by thinking about it, but by what happens to you inside it. That is structural difference, not romantic. Structural. Now let me tell you what specifically is different about her. Not in the poetic sense, in the real sense. The sense that I've had to sit with quietly and examine honestly, the way you examine any important variable before you build your life around it. She is calm. And I don't mean passive. I mean the deep kind of calm, the kind that comes from a person who knows who they are and doesn't need the external world to confirm it. She doesn't reach for approval. She doesn't perform her intelligence. She doesn't need the room to react in order to know her own value. That quality, that settled self-knowledge, is rarer than people realize. And for someone like me, who lives at high velocity, who operates in environments of constant uncertainty and pressure and noise, that calm isn't just attractive, it's necessary. It's the ballast that keeps the ship upright. Think about it this way. I have spent my life in orbits of intensity. The work is intense. The stakes are intense. The pace is relentless. And what I had searched for, without always knowing I was searching, was not someone who could match that intensity. Anyone can escalate. What I needed was someone who could ground it. Someone who could receive the full force of this life and not be destabilized by it. Someone whose nervous system said, I'm not afraid of this. I'm not afraid of you. If she does that, she has always done that. And I want you to notice something, because it matters for you too. When someone is genuinely secure in themselves, when they carry that internal steadiness, they don't diminish you. They don't compete with you. They don't need to pull you down to feel safe beside you. They stand next to you, fully themselves. And somehow that makes you stand taller. Not because they're complimenting you, because their presence reminds you of who you actually are when you're not performing. That is the rarest thing in the world. Have you ever been around someone like that? Someone whose presence didn't ask anything of you, didn't need you to be impressive or measured or careful, but simply received you as you were? No agenda, no performance required, just, here you are. I see you. That's enough. I have felt that with her. And I need you to understand that feeling is not small. That feeling is not a detail. That feeling is the entire foundation. Because here is the uncomfortable truth I had to sit with. For a long time, I chose people who needed me to be impressive. And I told myself that was because of their standards. But it wasn't. It was because I needed to be impressive. I was comfortable being needed for what I could build, what I could solve, what I could provide. I was less comfortable, far less comfortable, being wanted for nothing other than who I am.
Realistic pace number that also work out it's quite
And the first time I really felt that, really understood it, I didn't feel relief. I felt terror. Because to be wanted for who you are requires you to believe you are worth wanting, and believing that truly, quietly, without the armor of achievement, is the hardest thing I have ever been asked to do. But she didn't ask me to do it all at once. That's the other thing. That's the thing that set her apart from every version of connection I'd experienced before. She was patient, not in the resigned way, not in the way that says, I'm waiting for you to catch up, in the way that says, I'm already here. Take your time. There's a difference between someone who tolerates your pace and someone who trusts your direction. Tolerance is conditional. It has an expiration somewhere in the future, a point at which patience becomes resentment. But trust is structural. Trust says, I don't need you to arrive immediately. I trust that you're moving toward what matters. She trusted my direction before I had proven it to her. Do you understand what that does to a person when someone trusts you before you've earned it? It doesn't make you lazy. It doesn't make you complacent. It makes you, and this surprised me, more careful, more intentional, because now there is something genuinely precious at stake. Not a deal, not a negotiation, a person's actual faith in you. And I did not want to be careless with her faith. That is why she is different. Not because she is perfect, not because she checks every variable on a list, but because the way she sees me and the way she stands in herself calls for the best version of what I am capable of being. Not by demanding it, not by withholding love until I perform it, by simply being the kind of person that makes growth feel less like work and more like arrival. Some people make you want to be better for them. She makes me want to be better for me. And she does it just by being exactly, completely, unbendingly herself.
The shippers, structural, foundational, real.
And once you've felt that kind of difference, everything else, everything you once called connection, feels like a conversation you are having with yourself in an empty room. There is a version of choosing someone that is safe, and then there is the version that costs you everything comfortable. The safe version keeps one hand on the door. It says, I'm here, but I'm not fully here. I care, but not so much that losing you would break something real inside me. The safe version protects you. It gives you plausible deniability. If it falls apart, you can say, I never really gave it everything, so the loss isn't really a loss. I know that version. I've lived inside that version. But I want to tell you, it is the loneliest place I have ever been. Because what I discovered, slowly, uncomfortably, in the way that true discoveries always arrive, is that the safe version isn't protection. It's a cell. A beautifully constructed, logically justified cell. You've built the walls yourself, and you've told yourself it's architecture. You've called it wisdom, you've called it emotional intelligence, you've called it learning from the past. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Half presence is not a strategy. It's a slow surrender to fear. And fear, if you let it steer long enough, will take you somewhere you never intended to go, somewhere quiet, somewhere numb, somewhere where everything is fine and nothing is alive. I've been in that place, and the morning I finally admitted it to myself was the morning I understood what choosing completely actually costs. It costs you your armor, the whole thing, not piece by piece, all of it. It asks you to walk into the possibility of a person with nothing held back, no contingency plan, no exit strategy mapped quietly in the back of your mind. Just, I choose this, I choose her, completely, without a guarantee that it won't one day ask everything of me. And the mind, my mind, your mind, any disciplined, forward thinking mind, resists that immediately, because we are wired for risk assessment. We are built to identify threat before it materializes, to prepare for failure before it arrives. This is not weakness. This is intelligence operating exactly as designed. But love, real love, the structural kind, is not a risk to be managed. It is a leap to be taken. Think about it the way I think about impossible ventures. Every time I have committed fully to something that the world called irrational, something with no guaranteed outcome, no proven precedent, no map, I did not do it because the numbers were safe. I did it because the cost of not trying was higher than the cost of failing. Because there are certain things so worth pursuing that caution itself becomes the greatest risk. She is one of those things. And the moment I understood that, the moment I stopped calculating what I might lose and started calculating what I was already losing, by not choosing completely, everything shifted. Wait, before you move past this, I need you to sit here with me for a second. Because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, easy to say, easy to talk about courage when you're not the one who got hurt the last time. You gave everything. And you're right, it is easy to talk about. It is one of the hardest things in the world to actually do. Because choosing completely requires something that no amount of logic can provide. It requires trust in yourself, not just in her, in you. Trust that even if this costs you something, you are capable of surviving the cost. Trust that your own heart is strong enough to be fully extended without breaking. Trust that vulnerability is not the same thing as fragility. That is the psychological mountain most people never climb. Not because they lack love, because they lack belief in their own resilience. They've been hurt before, we all have, and the nervous system remembers. It files the memory under threat. And every time a new person arrives who matters, who really matters, that file opens. And the system says, last time you gave everything, you came back with less than you left with. Are you sure you want to do this again? I understand that question. I've heard it. I've felt it. But here's what I've learned about resilience. Genuine resilience is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of meaning. When you do something that matters, when you choose someone who is genuinely worth choosing, the vulnerability isn't reckless. It's purposeful. And purposeful vulnerability is one of the most powerful human experiences available to us. It doesn't just open you to love, it opens you to yourself. It forces you to locate the parts of you that have been waiting, quietly, to be trusted with something important. She gave me that. She gave me the experience of being someone worth trusting with something important. And so I chose, not cautiously, not strategically, completely. Let me tell you what completely looks like, because it doesn't look the way movies suggest. It isn't dramatic. It isn't a grand declaration in front of a crowd. It is quieter than that, and more precise. Choosing completely looks like this.
You stop rehearsing what you'll say if it doesn't work. You stop imagining the fallback position. You stop measuring your investment against what you might lose. You redirect all of that energy, all of that mental processing power that was dedicated to self-protection, and you point it toward the one thing that actually matters: her.
You start asking different questions. Not, what if this fails? But what does she need from me today? Not, how much should I give before I've given too much? But what does it look like to show up for this person with everything I have? That shift, that single reorientation of internal questions, changes everything. Because the quality of your presence changes. The depth of your attention changes. The way she feels in the relationship changes. And here's the part that surprised me most. The way you feel changes. Choosing completely doesn't make you weaker. It makes you more yourself. Because you are no longer spending energy on the architecture of protection. You are spending it on the architecture of connection. And connection, real connection, built on full presence and genuine choice, it generates something. Something that looks remarkably like meaning. And that's when everything I thought I understood about strength had to be rebuilt. Because I had always believed that strength meant self-sufficiency, composure, the ability to operate at full capacity regardless of external conditions. I had trained myself to need very little, to be unmoved by what others could not control. I treated emotional need as a liability, something to be minimized, optimized, quietly managed. But choosing her completely taught me something that no mission, no achievement, no solved problem had ever taught me. Strength is not the elimination of need. Strength is the courage to need someone fully and to let them know it. Strength is standing in front of another person with your entire architecture visible and saying, "This is what I'm building. I want you inside it, not as a visitor, as the foundation." That is what choosing completely means. Not the absence of fear, the decision to move toward her anyway. Every morning, every conversation, every moment where the door was technically still open, choosing to close it. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Because she is the reason the room is worth being in. And I will tell you this, from everything I know about building things that last, about systems that hold under pressure, about structures that outlast every doubt thrown at them, the decision to choose completely is not the most frightening leap you will ever take. It is the most honest one. Most people think that ambition and love are in tension, that the bigger the mission, the smaller the room left for real intimacy, that if you're genuinely consumed by the work, by the scale of what you're trying to do, by the relentlessness it demands, then love becomes something you visit when the mission permits it. A warm room at the end of a long corridor. Real, but remote. Present, but rationed. I used to believe that. I don't anymore. Because I've discovered something that reframes the entire equation. The question isn't whether love and mission can coexist. The question is whether the person beside you understands the mission, not as a rival to your love, but as part of the same architecture. Whether they can look at the full scope of what you're building, the full cost of what it requires, and say, I see it, I understand it, and I'm not asking you to choose. That person changes everything. Let me be direct about what living inside a large mission actually feels like. Because from the outside, it looks like drive, like success, like a man who knows exactly where he's going. And in some ways, that's accurate. But from the inside, the honest inside, it is also a particular kind of loneliness. The loneliness of caring deeply about something that most people cannot fully see, of carrying a vision that exists right now only inside your own mind, vivid, detailed, urgent, and having no guarantee that the world will ever see it the way you see it. That loneliness doesn't disappear with success. It doesn't dissolve when the mission starts gaining ground. In fact, it often deepens, because the bigger the work becomes, the fewer people can actually stand inside the full weight of it with you and remain steady. But here's what nobody warned me about. The version of loneliness I feared most in love was not being misunderstood by her. It was being reduced by her, being with someone who looked at the mission and, consciously or not, asked me to make it smaller, not out of malice, out of fear, out of the very human need to have a partner who is here, fully, consistently, without the gravitational pull of something enormous constantly competing for attention. I understand that need. I do. It is real and it is fair. But there is a particular kind of woman, rare, and I have to be honest about how rare, who doesn't experience the mission as competition, who has enough internal solidity that she doesn't need to shrink your purpose to feel secure in your love, who can hold both things simultaneously, without confusion, the depth of your feeling for her, and the scale of what you're called to build. She is that woman. And the way I know it isn't just that she says the right things. It isn't that she tolerates the long hours or the mental distance on the nights when the work is loud in your head. Those are the minimum requirements. Tolerance is not understanding. Tolerance is endurance. What I'm describing is something deeper, something that belongs to a different category entirely. She asks about the work the way a co-founder asks about the mission, not from the outside as an observer, from the inside as someone who has made the question hers. She wants to understand it, not because she needs to approve of it, but because she cares about what I care about. And that distinction between tolerating what your partner cares about and genuinely caring about what they care about is the difference between a relationship that survives the mission and a relationship that becomes part of it. Think about what that means at the deepest level. Purpose, researchers have found, is one of the most powerful predictors of well-being. Not comfort, not pleasure, but the sense of meaningful direction in one's life. And when the person who loves you actively tends to that purpose, when they protect it, celebrate it, ask questions about it at midnight because they genuinely want to understand, they are doing something profound. They are not just supporting you, they are sustaining the part of you that makes you most yourself. And in return, something extraordinary happens to the mission itself. It grows differently when it is loved. I don't mean sentimentally, I mean structurally. A person who is genuinely known at home, who returns to a presence that sees them, that receives them, that restores them, brings a different quality of energy to their work than someone carrying the weight alone. They take clearer risks. They recover faster from failure. They hold the vision with more steadiness when everything around them is uncertain. Not because love solves the problems, because love removes the background noise of fundamental loneliness, and in that quiet, the mind operates at a different frequency. She is that quiet for me. Look at me for a second, because this matters for you too, wherever you are right now. If you have a purpose, something that keeps you awake not from anxiety, but from aliveness, and you're trying to love someone who fundamentally doesn't understand it, or worse, who fears it, you are not just in a difficult relationship. You are in a relationship that will, over time, ask you to become less of who you are. Not because they are wrong, because the architecture doesn't fit. And the architecture has to fit. I have had the experience of being with people who loved me but didn't understand the mission. And I want to describe what that feels like accurately, because I think a lot of people are living in that gap without the language for it. It feels like being genuinely cared for while being gently, consistently, unintentionally translated into a smaller version of yourself. Like someone is loving the outline of you, the warmth, the humor, the presence in the room, but the full interior, the part where the vision lives, the part that wakes up at 3 in the morning with a new idea, that part remains unvisited. You smile, you adapt. You find ways to be present in the relationship without bringing the full weight of what you carry. And slowly, without intending to, you begin to curate yourself. You present the version that fits inside the relationship's available space. And the mission goes on, but in silence, in a separate room. Behind a door you stop inviting anyone to open. That is the loneliest experience I know. And then she arrived. And she opened that door without being asked. She walked straight in. She looked at everything inside it, the ambition, the scale, the unfinished blueprints, the ideas that made no conventional sense, and she didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She stepped closer. She said, not in a single sentence, but in the accumulated weight of every conversation since, I want to understand this. Not because I need to, because it's yours, and that makes it worth understanding. Do you know how rare that sentence is? Do you understand what it does to a person who has spent years carrying a vision largely alone? It doesn't just feel like love. It feels like partnership. The real kind. The kind where two people are not orbiting each other out of need, but moving in the same direction, out of genuine, chosen alignment. Not because your missions are identical, because your values are. And that is the thing I want to leave with you. Not as advice, as a mirror. The person who is right for you does not need to want what you want. They do not need to share your ambition or your industry or your particular definition of meaning. But they absolutely need, to respect the seriousness with which you pursue it. They need to find that quality in you interesting, not threatening. They need to hold space for the version of you that is most alive when the mission is in motion. Because the mission does not make you less available for love. The mission, properly understood, is love in another form. It is the same energy, the same impulse towards something larger than yourself, the same willingness to endure discomfort in service of something that matters, just pointed outward. And the woman who understands that, who can see the love inside the mission, and not just the mission instead of love, she is not just a partner.
In Mainstream again, please. She is proof that you found someone operating at the same depth.
And you build differently beside her. You build cleaner. You build with more intention, more patience, more joy. Because the foundation at home is solid. And when the foundation is solid, you can reach further than you ever imagined you were capable of reaching. That is what she is to me. Not the person I love despite the mission, the person who makes the mission, and everything beneath it, finally make complete sense. There is a frontier beyond achievement, beyond vision, beyond the outer edges of everything you've built and everything the world can see. It exists in a place that no blueprint reaches, no orbit maps, no press conference describes. It is the frontier of being fully known by another person, not known for what you've done, not admired for what you carry, not respected for what you've solved. Known, completely. The quiet interior of you, the fears no one interviews, the doubts no one publishes, the parts of yourself you've spent decades learning to function around rather than face. That frontier, that is the last one. And for a long time, I didn't believe I would ever cross it. I want to tell you something true, something I've had to work to be honest about, even with myself. I am more comfortable with uncertainty at scale than with vulnerability at close range. I can hold a vision for years in the face of every rational objection. I can absorb failure in public and return the following day with the same conviction. I can operate in conditions of extreme ambiguity without losing the thread. None of that frightens me the way one thing frightens me. Being seen without achieving anything. Being present without performing anything. Being loved for nothing other than the fact that I exist, and I am, imperfectly and completely, Me. And it will always betize near the agreed if these theses. That is the thing that has always required the most courage. And here's the confession I need to make. For most of my life, I solved this problem the same way I solve all problems, through output. I made myself valuable, I made myself necessary, I made myself extraordinary. And then being loved felt logical, not just emotional. It felt earned. It had a framework. If you asked me why someone should love me, I could build a case, I could present evidence, I could demonstrate value. And somewhere in the architecture of that strategy, I never had to answer the harder question, the question that sits underneath all the achievement and waits, quietly, with infinite patience. Am I lovable without the evidence? Do you know how long I avoided that question? Do you know how many people avoid it without ever knowing they're avoiding it? How many brilliant, driven, accomplished people have built entire lives as elaborate answers to a question they've never let themselves consciously ask? We construct monuments to our value. We accumulate proof. We stay in motion because in motion the question can't quite catch up. And it works until it doesn't. Until someone stands in front of you who isn't interested in the monument, who has looked past it entirely, who is watching you, just you, waiting not for the performance, but for the person inside it. She waited. She has always waited. And I want to describe, as precisely as I can, what it feels like to finally let someone in, all the way, past the accomplishments, past the composure, past the very particular version of yourself that you have curated over years of learning what the world rewards and what it punishes. It feels, at first, like standing in a room without walls, like there is nothing between you and the cold, like every instinct of self-preservation is firing simultaneously. The mind runs its threat assessment. It says, this is exposure. Exposure is risk. Risk is pain. Pain is to be avoided. And the body braces. The armor tightens. The performance begins to reassemble itself automatically because it has done so thousands of times before and it is very, very good at its job. But then something different happened. Something I did not expect. She didn't move. She didn't step back. She didn't reassemble her own composure in response to mine. She stayed exactly where she was, present and steady, and she looked at me with something I can only describe as patient recognition, as if she had been waiting for me to run out of performance, as if she had known, from the beginning, that underneath the architecture there was a person, just a person, and she had decided, long before I was ready to show him, that she wanted to know that person. And in that moment, the quiet, specific, unrepeatable moment, when I realized she was not going to leave, something inside me put down the weight it had been carrying. I don't have better language for it than that. Something put down a weight. Something exhaled for what felt like the first time. And I want to speak to you directly now, wherever you are in this. If you are the kind of person who has built their life around output, around being excellent, around being needed, around being the one who solves, who leads, who holds the vision when everyone else falters, then you understand, at some cellular level, what I'm describing. You know the armor. You probably put it on so long ago that you've stopped noticing it as armor. You experience it as personality, as strength, as your particular way of being in the world. But I need to tell you what I've learned. The armor doesn't just keep the pain out, it keeps everything out. It keeps her out. It keeps the quiet, real, irreplaceable experience of being known completely out. And you can live your whole life inside it, building brilliant things, loving at a careful distance, and feel a certain kind of pride in your self-sufficiency. And you will be lonely in a way that success cannot touch. Because here is what full knowledge, what being truly known, actually does to a person who finally allows it. It doesn't make you smaller. That is the fear that if someone sees all of it, the doubt and the weight and the unfinished parts, they will think less of you. That the performance was the valuable part and the person beneath it is ordinary. But that is the fear talking. That is the armor doing what armor always does, convincing you that you need it to survive. The truth is the opposite. Being fully known makes you more. It returns to you the parts of yourself you quarantined behind the performance. It says, this part, the quiet part, the uncertain part, the part that wonders at 3 in the morning whether any of it is enough. This part is also allowed to exist. This part is also real. And she loves this part, not despite it, including it. And when you experience that, when someone loves the complete inventory of who you are, something fundamental shifts in the way you exist inside your own life. You stop spending energy on self-management. You stop monitoring what version of yourself is showing. You stop calculating the distance between who you are and who you think you're supposed to be. You just become present, real, alive, in the specific, unmanaged way that human beings are only alive when they are not afraid. That is what she gave me. Not security in the dependent sense, not completion in the romantic myth sense, but a place, a specific, warm, real place in the world where I am not required to be extraordinary, where I am simply allowed to be, where the question, am I lovable without the evidence, has been answered, not with argument, not with logic, not with a case I built, but with her presence, her patient, unwavering, completely chosen presence. And I've been asking myself quietly what this means in the larger sense. What it means that the most transformative frontier I've encountered isn't located in space, or in technology, or in the architecture of systems. It's located here, in the interior, in the willingness to be seen, in the decision every day, a fresh decision, to trust that who you are is enough. This is what she has taught me, not by instructing me, by loving me, by being the consistent, living proof that the real version of a person, unperformed, unoptimized, undefended, is not just acceptable. It is the only version worth knowing. I know you've felt this pull, the pull towards someone who makes you want to put the armor down. Maybe you're standing at that edge right now. Maybe you've been standing there for a while, and every time you get close to the door, something old and protective pulls you back. I understand that. I've been there. But I want to tell you what's on the other side of the door. Not perfection, not the absence of fear or uncertainty, or the occasional weight of a life lived at full depth. What's on the other side is something quieter and more sustaining than any of that. It's the experience of being in a room with another person and feeling, not performing feeling, actually feeling that you are exactly where you are supposed to be, that the life you are building is the right life, that the person beside you is not just present, but genuinely, irreversibly chosen.
That is the final frontier. Not distance, not depth, not the scale of what you've built.
This, just this. Two people who have seen each other completely, who have chosen each other anyway, who return to that choice not from obligation or habit, but from the quiet, unshakable conviction that this is the most worthwhile thing they have ever decided. And maybe this is what I was building toward all along. Not the rockets, not the blueprints, not the vision of tomorrow, but a life with her, where every morning feels like a choice I'm proud to make again and again and again.